News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag in the back that says
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. What a remarkable week. This is indeed an age of illusions, and Barack Obama epitomizes the illusory nature of the age in which we live. Very much like the 1920s and 30s, as the European powers were so determined to never again repeat World War I, they embarked on a series of illusions which undergird their foreign policy, a very weak one which eventually led to the growth of Nazi Germany and engulfed Europe one more time in a great war, the Second World War. Again, we are living in an age of illusion where we are so desperate to prevent war, according to Obama and his administration, that we're going to slide right into it because we're willing to put our faith in people that do not deserve our faith, but deserve our suspicion, our mistrust. This week, President Obama concluded with his Secretary of State a deal with the Iranians, an Iranian regime which is a terrorist regime, a regime which has vowed to destroy Israel. This president believes that this is a historic moment because we will be able to monitor Iran's nuclear activity, he believes, and in exchange for being able to monitor this, international sanctions are going to be lifted. International sanctions are going to be removed from a regime that has been characterized as a rogue and terrorist regime. All of this because Obama is trying to convince us that there are no other alternatives, that either we do it his way or we go to war with Iran right away. He's been touting this as a historic achievement. In reality, contrary to what he's saying, the truth is more along the lines what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying. This is going to be a historic mistake, a moment that we will all deeply regret. We're going to untangle why in a couple of minutes, but now I want you to hear the president's own gloating words about this agreement. Roll it, Brittany.
Yesterday was a historic day. Comprehensive long-term deal that we achieved with our allies and partners to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon represents a powerful display of American leadership and diplomacy. It shows what we can accomplish when we lead from a position of strength and a position of principle, when we unite the international community around a shared vision, and we resolve to solve problems peacefully.
Well, he says the word, a comprehensive agreement. It wasn't comprehensive in the first place. It excluded 4 Iranian prisoners. And let's just take that off the table right now because that is very upsetting given how many concessions Americans made. And then he goes on to say that, America is leading. It's leading in this endeavor. The truth is that Russia and China and Iran are running circles around us in the world. America isn't leading. America is being played like a fiddle. What does this deal consist of? It consists of the entire regiment of sanctions that have been carefully built up over a decade culminating in some sanctions that were really tough on Iran. Iran was bristling under those sanctions, and it was really having an impact on its economy. That was a plan that we were embarking on that was actually working. But with this president, as happened in Iraq, when something is actually working, he doesn't seem to see how effectively it's working. And he believes that only he, in all his wisdom, can make things right. In reality, what he does is he destroys what is working in exchange for something that is catastrophic. That's what happened in Iraq. We had achieved stability there. And instead of building on what was working, he decided to reverse George W. Bush's foreign policy and precipitously withdraw the troops, which have led to a catastrophe there. The same thing is unfolding right before our eyes. As we remove the sanctions from this regime, we are capitulating without getting anything in return. We will not be able to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. In fact, this entire agreement is the roadmap. It is paving the way for the Iranians to get that bomb. Listen to his mealy-mouthed defense of an indefensible agreement.
We cut off every single one of Iran's pathways to a nuclear program, a nuclear weapons program. And Iran's nuclear program will be under severe limits for many years. Without a deal, those pathways remain open. There would be no limits to Iran's nuclear program, and Iran could move closer to a nuclear bomb. With this deal, we gain unprecedented, around-the-clock monitoring of Iran's key nuclear facilities and the most comprehensive and intrusive inspection and verification regime ever negotiated. Without a deal, those inspections go away, and we lose the ability to closely monitor Iran's program and detect any covert nuclear weapons program.
That is a bunch of baloney. What we were doing before, which was squeezing the Iranian regime of funds, was one of the most effective ways of curtailing their nuclear ambitions. Now, by allowing funds to pour into this regime, they're going to have the money and the ability to build the bomb that they so desperately want and that they will use on their neighbors, especially Israel. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal written by experts in nuclear proliferation, yes. And these experts basically argued that even if this deal contained the ability for inspectors to go in there and inspect the nuclear program anytime, anywhere, even if we had actually secured that, which we haven't, and I'll get to that in a moment, even if we had actually secured that, that wouldn't be enough to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. Because what you would also need is the government to put forward an entire list disclosing all of their activity. So you don't only need anytime, anywhere access, but you also need a truthful list provided by a government that is undertaking a nuclear program. And then you have some kind of a chance of monitoring them. We don't have that list. We don't even have anytime, anywhere inspections. According to this deal, the Iranians are going to get sometimes 14 or up to 24 days before inspectors can go in there and monitor their activity, which means they're going to run circles around the inspectors. As the money pours in and they get wealthier, they're going to be able to build facilities that we don't know about, and they're going to be able to move them around so that inspectors will not even be able to see what they are doing. This entire agreement is a farce. And you have the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, who had assured the public previously that there's one thing that we were going to get was at least anytime, anywhere inspections. And now he's singing a totally different tune.
Well, first of all, it is 24/7 continuous monitoring of their nuclear facilities. So we can see what they're doing in the facilities where they enrich uranium, again, where they operate centrifuges, where they have a reactor that will no longer be able to develop weapons-grade plutonium. We never sought in this negotiation the capacity for so-called anytime, anywhere, where you could basically go anywhere in the country, look at whatever you wanted to do, even if it had nothing to do with the nuclear program. What we did seek is beyond this comprehensive verification of the nuclear sites. If we have a suspicion about a site, we have the ability to go to the IAEA, the organization that conducts inspections, and to say, we need to inspect that site. If the Iranians object to that inspection going forward, we can overrule them with our European partners and say, no, that inspection has to go forward. And if they don't permit it then, they violate the deal and the sanctions snap back into place.
But the bottom line then is you're saying you never went for any time, anywhere. Because as you're well aware, critics of this deal seem to think that is really the core thing. If you don't have any time, anywhere, what do you really have?
This has the most robust inspections and verification regime that we've ever had in this type of agreement that we've negotiated, this type of arms control agreement. Not only does it have, again, this full monitoring of the nuclear supply chain, but again, if we want to see some, if we have...
You know, he goes on and on and on, and the upshot is they had promised us anytime, anywhere inspections, and now they're singing an entirely different tune. And they're going to be able to give the Iranians days and days of notice before we actually get access to any site that we're suspicious of. The entire thing is a farce. And you know what? You don't even have to take my word for it. The past tells us what the present and future is going to be. We had this very same discussion a year ago, 18 months ago, when it came to the Syrian dictator, Assad. We had a discussion about his chemical weapons. And the administration vowed that with the help of the Russians, we were going to be able to get entire control of Assad's stockpile of chemical weapons. And in fact, now that the public is no longer looking, there are reports that are percolating. We don't have all of those chemical weapons, and there is so much of his stockpile that he is deliberately hiding. And if this dictator could do that, if Assad can do that in Syria, what do you think the Iranians are going to be able to do? With millions of dollars in their coffers, which means multiple ways to hide and deceive. And what we've also seen, what the entire world has seen, is that the Americans do not know how to negotiate. We did not negotiate from strength. We negotiated from weakness, postponing one deadline after the other, and letting it be known that we would not use the military option on them if necessary. That's how this president negotiates. He takes the threat off the table, and then he basically says, please, please, please give me a deal, and if you don't give it to me today, I'll extend the deadline so you could give it to me tomorrow. This was an act of pathetic begging. That's what this administration did. They were begging for a deal, and the Iranians threw us crumbs and have rendered us a laughing stock. You know, we would truly be a laughing stock. It would be funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. I am deeply concerned about the Israelis, and as I said on this broadcast over a year ago, their security is under grave threat. And if I were Benjamin Netanyahu, I wouldn't wait for that nuclear bomb to be exploded over the Israelis, causing a catastrophe far greater than the genocide. It is time for him and like-minded partners in the region to take action, because America has just sold the Jews right down the river. This is Dr. Grace, distraught today, and hoping that the Israelis will do for themselves what America is failing to do for them, and upholding values that will never die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Wave after wave, wave after wave.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Well, last week, the Donald made waves. On Saturday, at a massive rally in Phoenix, he was the talk of the town. Initially, they were going to hold the event at the Biltmore Hotel, a swanky place. And then due to overwhelming demand, they had to bring it to a much larger venue. Today, we have somebody who was there and is reporting to us about what happened. She is the senior news writer at the Alliance Defending Freedom. She also used to work at the Washington Times. Her resume is extremely long. That's a small snapshot of it. Former editorial writer and now the senior news writer at Alliance Defending Freedom, and somebody who lives in the Phoenix area, and also my brilliant younger sister. Loredana, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
Well, Laura, you got a piece in World Tribune. It's titled, "We're Getting Ripped, Trump Says in Phoenix," and voices in the crowd say he is not a racist. You attended the rally. You are an eyewitness as to exactly what happened on Saturday afternoon. Can you describe the scene from the very beginning?
Yes, it was an absolutely incredible event. When I got to the Phoenix Convention Center, I actually got there. The event was supposed to start at 2 p.m., and I got there half an hour early thinking, I've got plenty of time. And when I got there, just to find parking garages were max to capacity. And I saw thousands of people. Just the streets were crowded, and it was just difficult just to find parking. And as I said, so many garages were full. And then finally, once I did that and I actually got to the Phoenix Convention Center, the lines were basically snaking around blocks to get in. And in the sweltering heat of over 100 degrees, people stood in line for an hour and 45 minutes just to get in. It was just insane.
Wow. What was the atmosphere like as they were standing in line? Were they being patient, or were they getting aggravated that it was so difficult to get in?
No, actually, that surprised me because most people usually do get upset about things like that. They were very patient and calm, and they were just all really excited and eager to meet Donald Trump and hear him and hear what he had to say. Of course, there were a lot of protesters, people holding signs, Trump is a racist, Trump equals hate, Trump is delusional. But that didn't sway the people in line. And I actually got to speak to a number of them because I wanted to get their take on what is it about Donald that, that makes them want to stand in line, and why do they want to hear him? And given his controversial statements recently about how illegal immigrants many of them are drug dealers and criminals and rapists, he's received a lot of backlash. But when I actually was talking to people who were waiting, they said, no, Trump is not a racist, and they believe he actually likes Mexican people and that he employs thousands of them for his company and all of his different business ventures, and that he pays them well and he treats them well. I met another woman who said that she actually has Latino friends from Central America and Mexico, that they are for Trump. And many others that were just simply saying that they actually believe that people should be entering this country legally.
So the ones that you spoke to that were from Central America, they were legal Hispanic immigrants.
No, I was saying that I had one woman said she had a friend who she has friends from Central America and from Mexico.
Oh,
I see. For Trump.
Who are for Trump. Okay, I see what you're saying. So I know that we're hearing that as well, that especially amongst the legal Hispanics, I think they're being painted with a broad brush in the media as though they don't, all they care about is their relatives that might be illegal. That's not true. There are many legal Hispanics who are just as concerned about the border crisis as everybody else is.
And that's what one resident from Sun City told me. He's a retired gentleman, and he was saying that he says that the Mexican people themselves who are legal here, they don't want criminals in the U.S. They don't want other illegals here. They want people, they want it to be safe. They think it's just as important as Americans to, secure the border.
Right. And, this charge against Trump that what he said was racist and offensive. But if you think about it, if we are not vigilant about who comes into our country, then that criminal element poses a danger even to Hispanics themselves. I mean, that's just common sense because they're more likely to be integrated in their communities. So if you really care for Hispanics, the legal Hispanics in this country, the argument to be made is you want to make sure that they're safe. And so we're, again, on the side of true compassion and not false compassion.
Yes, absolutely. And then once we actually got into the convention center, only about 5,000 people actually got in. And according to Trump's spokesperson, they actually distributed 15,000 tickets for the event. And so even though I was standing at the back of the ballroom at the Phoenix Convention Center, I could still see hundreds of people lined outside, still snaking around blocks, just trying to get in or trying to see him. But when we were actually at the event, there was a lot of energy, a lot of great music talking about getting America back, and that's what Trump's slogan is, make America great again. But it was very touching because during his speech, Trump introduced Jamie Shaw Sr., and he's the father of a high school student, a rising football star, who was actually gunned down in the street in Los Angeles in 2008 by a Mexican illegal immigrant. And it was a gang member who actually thought that this 17-year-old boy, he mistook him for another rival gang member and killed him. He shot him in the stomach and then he shot him in the head.
Another heartbreaking story.
Very heartbreaking. He was found guilty in 2012 and sentenced to death, but that still doesn't make up for the loss of this poor young boy.
And there are hundreds across the country with similar sad stories. Now, Laurie, tell me something. You said that there were protesters outside the venue as well. What were they saying? What were these protesters saying?
Basically, they were saying Trump is full of hate. Trump is a racist. Trump is delusional. Trump is a joke. He doesn't have a shot at becoming president. Get off our lawn. Get out of Arizona. We don't want you here.
And what was the interaction between the that's what I was going to ask. What was the interaction between the protesters outside and the people in line who were obviously supporting Trump?
Many of the people in line ignored the protesters. There were a couple that answered them back, and there were a couple of exchanges. But I would say for the most part, people just ignored them and went about just continuing to hold their posters and wear their buttons and support Trump, because many of them had Trump for president banners and posters and buttons.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Did you get a chance to observe what was the ethnic composition of the protesters? Were there any Hispanics amongst them, or were they just white people for the most part?
Most of them were, I would say, white people, which is actually ironic.
Which is ironic, because if he so offended Hispanics, you would think that the Hispanics would be rallying outside.
No, it was definitely white people. The majority were white people.
Right. Now, Laurie, describe the scene inside when Donald Trump was speaking. How did the crowd react to him, and what were the lines that garnered the greatest applause?
Well, from the get-go, he was. They just greeted him with thunderous applause. So he has a very great conversational style and makes people feel at ease. But he was. As from the minute he stepped out, he basically said that we have to stop illegal immigration, and people just went crazy. He would say we have to secure our borders, and they went crazy. Those were some of the key lines. But then he was talking about how we just have to make America great, how he has the experience running. He is a multi-billionaire, and that he can make America great again. He can help with jobs. He can... Also, he got a lot of applause when he talked about how he can really get ISIS on the run. That garnered a lot of cheers.
I think the public perception among his supporters is that if he's so successful in his private life, he's a winner. So he's going to win for America. That's, I think, the appeal of Donald Trump. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And he actually really told a funny kind of anecdote. And he said, I'm a doer and I get things done. He said, when the media asked Jeb Bush what he thought about Iraq and if it was the right decision to invade, for America to invade, it took him 5 days to come up with a comprehensive answer. And so everybody was booing and cheering, saying, yeah, that's ridiculous. And then Trump said, I'm a businessman, I'm a doer. It wouldn't take me. I would have answered the media immediately. I don't need 5 days to make a decision about what to do about anything.
And now you have members of the media say, like Jeb Bush, and he's been saying, we need to present a very sunny face to the public. We don't want to be the party of grievance, and we don't want to be a party that insults others. But how did the crowd react when he insulted, say, somebody like Jeb Bush or the media or anybody else? I mean, he throws insults left, right, and center. How is the crowd responding to that?
They were cheering. It was actually the only time they booed was any time that he mentioned Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton or the liberal media. That's when they started booing. For the most part, they were cheering everything that he said. So they actually really like his can-do attitude and his the fact that he's anti-establishment, the fact that he calls a spade a spade. That's what really makes him so appealing.
Right.
And the fact that, he doesn't have any ties to anything, any political ties, so he's not afraid to call out things as he sees them.
Right. And Laurie, my final question, you've given us a really excellent eye window account into the rally. I feel like I was there just by everything you've described. This is the question I'm wondering. Now, Donald Trump has definitely tapped into a chord in American society, this anger at the crisis that we have on our border and the influx of illegals. Is he just a one-issue candidate, or is there more to him?
Well, from the people in the crowd and the way that I was asking them if they thought he had a shot to win, they seem to think that, yes, he's more than just this one-trick pony on immigration. And as he outlined in his speech, he was going to do more than just secure the borders. He was going to create jobs, and he was going to improve our relations internationally, and he was going to fight the war on terror. So he definitely presented himself as a multifaceted candidate that has the gumption to go the distance. And I think that's what people really saw. And as I said, I asked people directly, do you think he can win the GOP nominee and then eventually win the general election? And all of them that I asked said yes.
Okay. Fascinating report, Laurie. Thank you for being our window into that really spectacular rally. You can read her piece at worldtribune.com. It's called We're Getting Ripped, Trump Says in Phoenix. Voices in the crowd say he is not a racist. It is full of individuals that Loredana interviewed. She got them on the record to say what they thought of Trump. And I think why this piece is so important is that it really goes contrary to the narrative that's been presented in our media, that so many people are offended by what he's saying. You interviewed so many people in your piece that are saying, no, not only are we not offended, but he is articulating what we are saying, what we think, what we feel. Thank you, Loredana, for being with us. She is the senior news writer at the Alliance Defending of Freedom, a former editorial writer at the Washington Times, a very talented woman. Thanks for being with us, Laurie.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And there you have it. Somebody who did some reporting right there on the ground, interviewing the crowd, giving us a snapshot into exactly what happened. This is Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, upholding values that will not die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am your host, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Well, as you heard in the previous segment, there are so many people saying we are not going to take it anymore. We're not going to take this unsecured border anymore. And Donald Trump is the champion for some. However, he is increasingly coming under fire. And here to discuss the other side of Trump, the side you may not know, is Mark Everson. He is a former CEO of the Red Cross. He is the former IRS commissioner and Reagan Bush appointee. And he's also a Republican presidential candidate. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Grace. Delighted to be here.
It's my pleasure. Now, tell us about the ever-shifting positions of Donald Trump.
Well, it's pretty clear. First of all, I'd say Trump is about Trump. Any idea that he's about anything else, I just think is false. And if you look at his record, all you have to do is go back to 15 years ago. He was what I would just call a garden variety New York liberal. Pretty clear. He espoused the positions you'd expect to see in New York City. Now they've changed totally now that he's moved over and become a Republican, and he's much more strident. It's a real problem. But my main issue right now with him is he's just for the sake of notoriety, he's really poisoning the well on this issue of immigration, which is a tough issue that we need to address. And what he's doing is he said some things that I think are way out of bounds, that are factually incorrect, and frankly, they're going to hurt the chance of the country to get and make progress on this issue. By the way, I would also say that the president has hurt immigration reform by his unilateral executive order after the election, which really caused all kinds of problems.
Right. Now, we don't want to get lost again in this immigration debate. I'm much more interested in hearing the other Trump, because the press has now been all over this story. We've heard both sides at great length. And I think right now opinions are pretty much consolidated. There are those who say, look, there's nothing he said there in those comments that are racist and offensive. And others who are saying, I mean, just recently this week on Fox News, Juan Williams was saying exactly what you're saying. He's saying, look, it's going to hurt the brand of the party. And what he said was deeply offensive. I think right now opinions on that are baked in. I don't think, though, we know enough about Mr. Trump. So tell us about the New York liberal positions that he took before.
Well, I think if you look on his evolution on pro-life, or where he was on that, where the things he said on gun control, it's a whole series of issues that you can go down the line on, and it's not too hard to see that he's just totally reversed around 180 degrees.
Now, is it possible, let me play devil's advocate. So he, for example, in 1999, he said that he was very pro-choice.
Yes.
He said that. That's on the record. Is it possible that he evolved, or you seem to be insinuating here that he changed his mind purely in a Machiavellian way?
Well, I think people do evolve. Let me say that. Opinions change. I've had an evolution in my thoughts on issues over the time. People get older. But it's a little too convenient. He's changed party registration along the way. And I don't think he's also, in many instances, all he's doing, Dr. Grace, is just saying, I'm going to solve this problem through force of my own will. He's not offering constructive solutions that are going to change things. And let me say this, though. He is speaking to a frustration that is real on behalf of the American people. People are dismayed with career politicians. They are dismayed with the way things are going on in Washington. That's real. But it doesn't help the country, and it certainly doesn't help Republicans for him to be just bombastically saying, I'm going to put up a wall and have the Mexicans pay for it. Come on, that's not going to happen. He can say all he wants and say I'm the best negotiator around, but you can't undermine international relationships. You can be a tough negotiator. Ronald Reagan was very principled, and he was a tough negotiator, but he didn't ever say the things that this gentleman is saying.
Well, in fairness to Donald Trump, he's not the only one, for example, saying that he's going to build a wall. We had Governor Mike Huckabee on this broadcast last week, and he said the very same thing. So I think...
Did he say that the Mexicans would pay for it?
No, he didn't say that. It'd be interesting to see how Donald Trump is going to get the Mexicans to pay for that wall. But you're right when you say, look, there's a huge frustration in the country, and there's also a dissatisfaction with career politicians. And his appeal is that he's not that. He's a businessman who has gotten things done. And so that's why you're seeing, this massive rallying to him. But let me ask you a couple questions on his flip-flopping. So he flip-flopped, we know for sure, on the issue of life. What about on guns? What was his position before, and what is it now?
I think that he's been sort of ambivalent on some of the guns, is what I would say. He's sending mixed messages. Go to healthcare, though. In healthcare, he was very clear that he was for I think his exact words were, "I'm very liberal on healthcare." So he's changed, and now he's, talking about the disaster of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. That's another change that's convenient if you're suddenly running as a Republican.
Well, you're 100% right that he was once for universal health care. Now, that's a very radical position. I mean, even amongst Democrats, you had a debate about that. So he was really way out there on the left on health care. And now he's calling Obamacare a complete disaster, and he's calling it a jobs killer. So he's definitely reversed himself in that regard. What about on Hillary Clinton? What did he say before, and what is he saying now?
Oh, I think he said, the Clintons were good friends of his, buddies of his, and he was pretty positive. So, and listen, you've got business interests. There's nothing wrong with a business leader having friends in both parties. Great. But let's be square with the people and say who you are, what you've stood for, and also say what you're going to do if you get entrusted with this great power of the presidency.
Right. And, I think, though, that when we're talking about the Clinton issue, I find it extremely disturbing. I don't really accept his explanation on that. I think the Clintons are very corrupt. I wouldn't give them money under any circumstance. He not only donated to the Clinton campaign, but he also donated to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, even if you take his rationale and say as a businessman he needed to give to both parties, there's no reason for him to have given to the Clinton Foundation. The point that it shows us that he had a really cozy relationship with the Clintons, and he didn't care how corrupt they are.
Well, I'll go with you on that, because I wrote a piece on this some months ago when the email furor was just getting going. It's what's so ridiculous about having all these government records in this Chappaqua server and they all get deleted. Hillary Clinton has said, well, I gave all the State Department records. Those aren't the important records. The important records are the ones that are between her and outside parties, where the big banks saying, hey, Hillary, we got to get this reset with Russia. Or where the oil companies saying, hey, Hillary, we've got to have this lead from behind strategy to get Libyan oil. Who knows what was being said, but all of it was erased, and including all the tie-ins through the foundation. So it's very murky. All this web of transactions is totally unknown, because a Secretary of State really, I think, acted outside of her authority and had all this going on at home. We'll never know what happened here, and that's tragic.
And if we're looking for somebody that we're going to elect that's really going to get some accountability on this entire email scandal, he's not likely to be the one to do it, because he gave to the Clinton Foundation. So he's in some ways compromised. And I mean, he gave to the foundation knowing that the Clintons are corrupt. There's no way you can say that he didn't know how corrupt Bill and Hillary Clinton are.
Well, that's the thing. But the other thing is that listen, what I'm offering the American people is I have private sector experience. I've run a factory making beverage cans in Chicago. I've lived overseas in Turkey, in France, in Zambia. Plenty of private sector experience. I also had 6 years under Reagan in foreign affairs and at the Justice Department, 6 years under the second Bush at the Office of Management and Budget. Then the president asked me to go run the IRS. It was clean when I was there, Dr. Grace. There were no allegations of targeting. So I know the government inside out. The idea that you're going to come in and just demand better deals, it's a little more complicated than that, is what I would suggest to you.
Right. Well, you have presented a lot of interesting information, and you say also that we know for a fact that he's even recently, he hasn't been a Republican his whole life. I mean, that too is recent. His very party affiliation is going to come under scrutiny. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that there's been a shifting there, independent and now Republican. Fair enough. You can shift parties, but it's got to be all considered when primary voters are saying who they want to lead them. Listen, I'm 60 years old, and I went overseas, and I worked on a poultry farm in Africa, in Zambia, if you will, in 1971. I probably went over there. I didn't have a party affiliation. I was 17 years old. It was a tough time, Vietnam, a lot of distrust of the government. But I went over there. I saw America's role in the world and understood it more. I came back the next year. The Democrats put up George McGovern, the most liberal candidate they've had. And he got trounced. I voted for Richard Nixon. Not too many college kids did that. But I've been pretty consistent over those years looking at what we need to do. He seems to have been pretty opportunistic, is what I would say.
Well, that's an interesting word. And I mean, the record is that he was a Republican, then he went to the Independent Party, then he became a Democrat, and then he became a Republican once again. And, sir, I really thank you for pointing all this out because I have been saying for a long time on Donald Trump, everybody slow down. I've been saying that I think this is a fad. I think he does tap into the frustration on our border, and he taps into the frustration of basically what appears to be a dysfunctional Washington, D.C. So people are saying, look, we need a businessman, we need somebody to shake things up. Those frustrations are real, and I also stand by him when he says that, look, there's a criminal element coming in with this illegals, and I applaud him for talking straight. However, I do not think this is the man for our party. I think, as I've said in my piece I wrote on Governor Huckabee, I said, if you look at Donald Trump, this man has been married 3 times, including having had an adulterous relationship with the second woman, the one that would become his second wife. Is this the man we really want to represent the party of traditional values? What does that say about us if this is the road we go down?
Well, I would say, listen, I made mistakes myself, Dr. Grace. People make mistakes, but what Trump doesn't do is he doesn't acknowledge his mistakes. He just goes forward and wears them with pride. That's the problem here. We're all human. We all make mistakes, but this false braggadocio, that is not going to work in this world today. And if we put him forth, what will happen is we will lose because all of the center will go, and then you will get Hillary Clinton. That's not what you want.
Right. Well, thank you for your comments. People say to me, well, Dr. Grace, Ronald Reagan was divorced. He made a mistake. Look, of course, everybody makes mistakes. And I think that Ronald Reagan, who was divorced and then was basically embraced by the GOP in the 80s, by then, one of the things I point out is by then he had been married to the same woman since 1952. So he was in a really, really stable relationship. And by all accounts, he had been the aggrieved party in his first marriage. So there's a lot of differences there, but I think with Donald Trump, we're seeing a man who is not just shifty in positions, as you've said, but he's been shifty in the very allegiances in his personal life, going from one family to another to another. We're on family number 3 here. I'm sorry, but there is making mistakes. That's one thing, and then finding your way back, correcting yourself. But with Donald Trump, it seems to be that it's an entire life's pattern of shifting allegiances, including the most central and sacred, those of family.
And he's proud of it. He thinks you can just pull your way through any situation. And look, I made my mistakes. I'm sure you have. Everybody has. And what you do is I've got a young son, and I drop him off at school each day. And when I do, I say to him, what's the day? And he says, it's Tuesday, it's art day, and it's another great day to do my best. Meaning you get up and you, with humility and courage, you do your best. That doesn't mean you can bull your way through life. And that's the fear I have with this particular candidate. And let me say this. I'm proud of the race we're having amongst the Republicans. I'm proud to be in it. Your listeners can go to markforamerica.com to learn more about me. And I'm not criticizing other candidates. I just draw a line in this particular case.
Well, thank you very much for your insights. That is Mark Everson. As he said, he is a Republican presidential candidate in 2016. You can learn more about him, markforamerica.com, markforamerica.com. He was also the former CEO of the Red Cross and a former IRS commissioner under Reagan and Bush. Thank you very much for having been with us today.
Nice to be with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So there you go. Donald Trump is going to be examined now under a microscope. In the first segment here that we did on this show preceding this one, we explored his strengths. In the next one, his weaknesses. And I think as we go forward, you're going to see more and more scrutiny and a lot more members within the Republican Party saying, I'm not so sure. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com, upholding values that will not die.
Losing friends and I'm chasing sleep. Everybody's worried about me.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com. In this segment, every week, we look around the country and find someone who deserves to be told to just shut up. Well, I had shelved this story because other stories took precedence, but I really want to make my voice be heard on it. It's about Bill Cosby. He has been in the news. Over 42 women have accused him of inappropriate behavior. Much of this includes them being drugged, waking up in a stupor, not knowing what had been done to them, and believing that they were sexually assaulted or raped. The women have various versions of this story. We're not talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 12, 20, or even 30. Slate has actually a list. We're at 42. 42 women. That's a lot of women. And there are those who say, you know what, Bill Cosby is innocent. We shouldn't cover this story. The reason he's coming under attack is because he has been a public moralist, especially on issues like parenting. And there's some kind of witch hunt against him. And this is a conspiracy. Well, that is a bunch of garbage. When I first heard these allegations, I immediately sided with the women. It's just common sense. One of the points to be raised is, how could you possibly get that many people to conspire? If you try to get even, let's say, 10 people to conspire, 1 or 2 of them breaks ranks and blows the lid wide open. It's very difficult to get that many women to conspire. But in addition, even more compelling than that, it's not just that all the women had the same story, or roughly the same story, the same pattern of behavior they were describing. It's also that women, for the most part, find it extremely degrading, humiliating to discuss something like this. For the most times, and it's been decades that feminists have been saying, look, women, you have to come forward if this happens to you. Most times, women feel so degraded by a sexual assault upon them, even if it's not their fault. They feel so degraded by it that they never, ever want to discuss it. Not to their husbands, not to their sisters, not to their friends, and certainly not to the wider public. So it is true that sometimes men are falsely accused. But in the majority of cases, when women come forward describing this behavior, you've got to listen to them very carefully and give them the benefit of the doubt, for the most part, especially when we're talking about 40 and above, 40 women and above saying the same thing. When Cosby was first asked about these allegations, this is what he said.
I just wanted to ask if you wanted to respond at all about whether any of that was true.
There's no response.
Okay. Can I ask you, if with the persona that people know about Bill Cosby, should they believe anything differently about what...
There is no comment about that.
And of course there is no comment about that, because he is guilty. An innocent man would not say, when accused of such disgusting behavior, there is no comment. If you accuse Dr. Grace of this, I wouldn't just respond. I would be yelling about my innocence. I would be indignant, and I would be fighting for my reputation. Instead, he was saying no comment. And you know why? Well, the truth has come out. Recently, a judge has unsealed a deposition which Cosby himself gave. This deposition occurred in 2005, and it concerned a similar story, a woman accusing him of having been drugged. He settled this lawsuit with this woman. She was suing him for damages. And in that deposition, he admitted getting Quaaludes in order to drug this woman. Now, in light of these revelations, many former Cosby supporters are saying, look, I've got to give up my fight in defense of him. It's obvious that he's guilty, and he's losing the public relations battle. However, there are some who still insist that Cosby is innocent. And one of these individuals is Whoopi Goldberg. Listen to this.
This is my opinion. And in America, still, I know it's a shock, but you actually were innocent until proven guilty. He has not been proven. I don't like snap judgments because I've had snap judgments made on me. So I'm very, very careful. And, save your texts, save your nasty comments. I don't care.
You know, Whoopi, you're certainly entitled to your opinion. And I don't believe anybody should be nasty just for your opinion. However, this is not a snap judgment that we're making here. And what you're failing to see is that you are basically accusing all those women of lying. So you are the one that is making a judgment about the moral caliber of these women. You're saying they're lying because you want to hold on to this fictitious view that you have of Bill Cosby. Listen, Whoopi, you could simply say, Cosby is a friend of mine, and I find this topic very painful. How about saying that? I think lots of us who have had friends caught in compromising situations, we could sympathize with that. But when you're saying he's innocent until proven guilty, when all the evidence is pouring forth that he is guilty of a sin, I mean, you're making a fool of yourself, and it's time to just shut up. Well, I have had the time of my life, literally. This episode marks the 2-year anniversary of American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I launched this show in the middle of July in 2013, and I cannot believe that 2 years have gone by. Where does the time go? In July of 2013, I still was basically cradling my newborn baby girl. She was just a little bit over 6 months old. And my 2-year-old son at the time, he was 2.5, he was in the full-fledged terrible twos. And between the two of them, I hardly got a good night's sleep or any kind of sleep the whole subsequent 2 years that have gone by. And yet somehow, week after week after week, I managed to get this broadcast done, and I've received so much support from all of you out there who love the show and who support the values that I uphold every week. I want to just thank a couple of people as I celebrate my 2-year anniversary. One of them is Brittany Jennings, who works in the booth with me every week, and she knows the struggles that we've been through, and I really want to thank her for putting up with it all the family drama included, and for doing such a great job every week and standing by my side. We're certainly going to celebrate our 2-year anniversary as we did our 1-year anniversary. We went out for margaritas, she's saying it in my ear, margaritas and guacamole, and we're going to have a grand time. And, of course, I've got to thank my husband, who, no matter what a strain it is on him sometimes when mom's got to leave and say, here, you take care of these 2 screaming toddlers, even though you've had a really hard day's work yourself, he always says, go for it, don't stop, you're doing great. And that's the kind of man that deserves extra special attention this week as I celebrate my 2-year anniversary. And also want to thank my family, especially my younger sister. You heard her on this broadcast. She and I are best of friends, and she never misses an episode of American Heartland. And that's the kind of loving family that I am blessed to have. They are all so supportive. And especially to the audience out there, I really want to thank you for how you've embraced the show. We are growing by leaps and bounds. You inspire me to keep going. And it looks like American Heartland is going to expand. We're looking at doing 2 hours, and soon those 2 hours are going to turn into a live broadcast. And this would not have been possible without all of your loving support. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You know, I do this show because, as I've said many times, these values that I uphold every week, they are at the core of my being. It is my vocation to uphold these values. And I know that there are so many of you just like me in your jobs, in your personal life, doing your best every week to uphold these values that will never die. Let's keep on fighting. We are winning one day at a time, 1 year at a time, as shows like this grow and as our message penetrates more and more hearts. This is Dr. Grace, really jubilant on her 2-year anniversary and getting ready to celebrate with Brittany with margaritas and guacamole. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never die.
It's a big old land with countless dreams. Happiness ain't out of reach.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.